since the birth of the modern safari industry. We've done something extraordinary. Every single day, somewhere in the world, somebody falls in love with the idea of Africa. To feel her soil beneath their feet and the warmth of her sun on their face. To stand in awe of the quiet majesty of an elephant or the grace of the big cats. To discover the warmth, generosity, and spirit of the African people. But they don't know where to go, or when to travel, or which experience will become one of the greatest memories of their lives. They simply have a dream. And every day, our industry makes it a reality. For more than 50 years, that has been the miracle of African tourism. Thousands of extraordinary people turn these hopes into reality. Not by chance, but through knowledge, earned through experience, shared between guides, consultants, lodges, DMCs, travel advisors, and thousands working quietly behind the scenes. For more than 50 years, knowledge has been the foundation of African tourism. Then, 25 years ago, our industry experienced one of its defining moments. The internet changed how travelers discovered Africa. It changed marketing, distribution, and customer acquisition. Our industry was changed forever. But one thing remained remarkably constant. Turning somebody's dream into an extraordinary African journey still depended on human knowledge, expertise, and judgment. Until now, because something is changing once again. Unlike the internet, artificial intelligence isn't just changing how travelers discover Africa. It's changing how African journeys are fulfilled. For the first time in 5 decades, the time, cost, and complexity of African travel is starting to collapse. And when the economics of fulfillment change, everything changes. This shift isn't coming. It has already begun. Over the next few minutes, one question matters more than any other. How will AI shape the future of African tourism? So, whether you've agreed with him or argued with him, for more than 2 decades, he has challenged conventional thinking in African tourism. In 2004, armed with little more than a dial-up internet connection, a pay-as-you-go telephone, relentless belief, and a deep love for Africa, he founded Rhino Africa. 22 years later, he believes African tourism stands at its next defining moment. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome David Ryan.
Good morning, everyone. David, Kim, Natalia, and the entire SATSA team, thank you for inviting me to speak today. It is genuinely a privilege to be here, although I have to say, in a world that is changing as fast as AI, standing on a stage in 2026, talking about the future of African tourism feels a little bit like predicting the weather in Cape Town. Now, I've lived here my entire life, so I know I am bound to be wrong. I'm just hoping it won't be within the first 5 minutes. But in all seriousness, that little movie ended with a question. How will AI shape the future of African tourism? Which naturally raises another question, how do I know? Well, the honest answer is, I don't. So I'm not standing here this morning because I know the future. I'm standing here this morning because over the last 18 months, I've become incredibly curious about it. But I should start by saying that that curiosity actually started from a place of defensiveness. I simply didn't want Rhino Africa to be one of those businesses sitting in a boardroom 10 years from now saying, we saw it happening, we just didn't think it would happen to us. So I started paying attention, not to AI initially, but to the patterns. I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time in the African bush, and one of the people I admire the most is the tracker. Now, not because trackers can find animals. I mean, eventually anyone can find an elephant. Elephants are not exactly the masters of hide and seek. But because trackers see patterns, the rest of us simply walk straight past. And what I have come to realize is that disruption behaves in exactly the same way. Every week, there seemed to be a new AI model, a better one, a faster one, a more capable one, until eventually I realized we were no longer looking at a collection of clever new technologies. I was looking at the tracks of something much, much bigger. But I had seen these tracks before, 23 years ago. Back then it was called Google. When I launched Rhino Africa in 2004, people genuinely thought we had lost the plot. Just the idea of convincing someone to spend $20,000 on an African safari off a website, well, it seemed ridiculous. And today, we complain when they only spend 20. It's funny, you see, how quickly the impossible becomes normal. But here's the thing. The internet didn't change tourism because it was a clever technology. It changed tourism because it fundamentally changed the economics. It changed how people discovered Africa, it changed how businesses acquired customers, and it changed where value was created. And as a result, everything else followed. And that lesson has never left me, because if there's one thing the last 22 years have taught me, it is this. When the economics of our industry change, everything else follows. And that's the question I couldn't stop thinking about. In a world of artificial intelligence, are the economics of our industry about to change again? And if they are, well, what happens next? So we started investigating, and we did what Rhino Africa has always done when we don't understand something. We got curious. Now, I should probably warn you that curiosity isn't always an efficient business strategy. And over the last year, we have tested hundreds of AI models, built hundreds of AI agents, and we have broken most of them. But every now and again, we will build something and we would genuinely think, oh my God, this is unbelievable. It has to be magic. And then 10 minutes later, it would confidently recommend something completely ridiculous. And that's when we'd be reminded that artificial intelligence still had a few growing pains. But buried beneath all that experimentation, one afternoon, sitting with my team, someone asked a question that completely changed how I thought about AI. Not what can AI do, but what is AI actually making abundant? And that question stopped me in my tracks, Because when you look back through history, I quickly realized that every major technology shift has done exactly the same thing. It took something that was scarce and it made it abundant. Printing made books abundant. The internet made information abundant. Cloud computing made computing power abundant. And every single time, the economics changed and value moved. That's when I realized we'd actually all been asking the wrong question. It was never, what can AI do? The question was, what is AI making abundant? Now, at first I thought it was information, but then I realized Google had already done that. Then I thought it was content, but the internet had done that too. And eventually it hit me. AI is going to make something far more valuable abundant. Knowledge. Now, at first that sounds like semantics, but it isn't, because that single realization raises an even bigger question. How? How can AI possibly make knowledge abundant? Now, I would love to spend this session unpacking that question, but unfortunately, Kim only gave me 28 minutes, so we'll have to save that for the sequel. Maybe David will invite me back next year if AI hasn't already explained it better than I can. But here's what really matters. We've all lived through technology revolutions before. The internet, smartphones, cloud computing, social media. Every one of those technologies changed our businesses, but not one of them changed knowledge. They only changed how we or our clients access knowledge. And that's the profound difference, because in our industry, knowledge has inherently always lived inside of extraordinary people. And because knowledge has lived in humans, it has been one of our biggest constraints in the growth of African tourism. Not because we didn't have enough of it, but because it's always lived inside of people. And we've never been able to scale it until now. And that's the profound difference. For the first time, artificial intelligence allows us to capture, organize, and apply human knowledge at scale. So human knowledge no longer has to live only inside of humans. And that's what's going to make knowledge about our industry abundant. And that's also the moment that everything changed for me. But I realized we weren't looking at another chatbot or a new piece of software. We were looking at an entirely new way of scaling human knowledge. And that changes everything. So for today, I simply ask that you accept one premise. For the first time in our history, we can capture, organize, and apply human knowledge at a scale we've never been able to do before. And if that's true, well, then everything changes, because the economics of fulfillment are about to start changing. And it's going to force us to ask ourselves an even more interesting question. And that is, what business are we actually in? Now, I can see a few of you looking at me thinking, David, you have finally lost the plot, because at first that question sounds ridiculous. We've all been in tourism for years. Surely we know what business we're in. But the more I sat with it, the more I realized I'd been looking at my own business through completely the wrong lens. And whether you're a lodge, a DMC, a tour operator, a travel advisor, or even a tourism board, we've all been doing exactly the same thing. We're managing knowledge. Think about it. Every reservation system, every CRM, every itinerary, every consultant, they all exist to capture, organize, and apply knowledge so that we can turn someone's dream of Africa into a reality. And that's what we've all been building for decades. We're not just tourism businesses, we're knowledge businesses. And because knowledge has always been scarce, managing it became our competitive advantage. That's why quoting is inherently expensive. That's why we develop systems. And that's why every agent wanting to sell Africa around the world needs a DMC. And it's also why your best consultants, guides, and employees are all worth their weight in gold. But then I realized something. What happens when knowledge is no longer scarce? What happens when knowledge becomes infrastructure? Now think about it. You're staying in Cape Town, so you don't need to check whether the lights are going to come on or whether the plumbing or the internet are going to work. You just expect it. And why? Because that is infrastructure. And my belief is that AI is about to do exactly the same thing for knowledge. Knowledge won't disappear, but it's going to become infrastructure to our industry. Always available, always connected, always improving. And if that's true, then we've all been asking the wrong question. The question isn't, how do I use AI? The question becomes, what kind of business do I build when knowledge is no longer scarce? And that became the question I couldn't stop thinking about. And eventually it forced me to make a decision, not to adapt Rhino Africa, but to build something entirely new. So I took everything I'd learned and I went back to my team at Rhino Africa, and we looked at our business through a completely different lens. And then I realized that after 22 years, we hadn't just built a safari company, we had built an extraordinarily sophisticated knowledge ecosystem. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized that almost every business in this room and in our industry has done exactly the same thing. We've taken years of accumulated expertise, thousands of products, complex systems, and they're all designed to capture, organize, and apply knowledge. And then something became obvious to me. You couldn't simply bolt AI onto an ecosystem or a business that had been designed for a world where knowledge was scarce. It might make yesterday's business a little more efficient, but it certainly isn't going to answer tomorrow's question. So we made a decision. If knowledge really was going to become infrastructure, we had to start by proving it. And not in a boardroom, not on a whiteboard, but in the real world. So we took the decision and we built an experiment. And we called it Magic Safari. Not to replace Rhino Africa, but to answer one question. What happens when knowledge becomes infrastructure? Now, I'd love to tell you that I possess the technical brilliance to build an AI platform, but sadly, I am not Sam Altman. I am a Gen X baby. I can still remember rewinding VHS cassettes and returning them to the video store. So I did what every good CEO does. I found someone a hell of a lot smarter than me, my co-founder, Philip. Now, what I can tell you is that if anything technical sounds impressive today, I can assure you that's on Philip. But I can also tell you that Philip, who's here with us today, also has an unhealthy obsession with Harry Potter. And right now I can see he's having a mild panic attack, wondering what I'm about to reveal next. Also joining us today, I can see, is our other co-founder, Lo. Now, Lo has somehow managed to survive the past year listening to Philip and myself debate AI. And frankly, that might be the most impressive achievement of the three of us. But together, we have taken 22 years of Rhino Africa's accumulated knowledge, and instead of leaving it trapped inside of people, documents, and disconnected systems, over the past year, we've captured it, structured it, and connected it. And we have transformed it into a single AI native knowledge ecosystem, which we like to call the Magic Lake. Not another application, not another booking system, an entirely new layer of infrastructure. Because if knowledge really is going to become infrastructure, that's what we needed to build first, because everything else can be built on top of it. And today, Philip and his Dumbledore army, as he affectionately likes to refer to them, which is made up of about 400 specialized AI agents, work across that ecosystem. And the first application they built on top of that infrastructure is Africa's first native AI safari planner. But here's why that's important. The planner isn't the breakthrough. The AI native knowledge infrastructure is. Because today, one of our industry's best consultants can spend hours creating an extraordinary African itinerary. Not because the planning is difficult, but because connecting systems, finding availability, and applying decades of accumulated knowledge takes time. And that's expensive. But when knowledge becomes instantly available, those bottlenecks disappear and the economics begin to change. Not because we've replaced the consultant, but because we fundamentally start to change the cost of applying knowledge. So this was never about building an AI travel planner. The planner is simply the first proof that the infrastructure works. Because if knowledge really becomes infrastructure, then the economics of our industry are going to fundamentally change. But rather than me tell you, let me give you a little demo. Let me introduce you to the Magic Safari Planner.
Hi, I'm Justine. I've been designing luxury African safaris for more than 20 years. Let me show you how I create an itinerary using the Magic Safari Planner. These are two of my favorite clients, Mr. and Mrs. Schwartz. They live in New York and have traveled with me 11 times over the last 2 decades. They trust me because I know Africa and because I know them. This time, they want to bring their 2 grandkids on their very first safari, visiting South Africa's Sabi Sand, Botswana's Okavango Delta, and Zimbabwe's famous Victoria Falls. A few months ago, this would have taken me hours to plan, checking availability, comparing lodges, working out flights and logistics, and making dates fit, all while balancing budgets. And one change here meant changing 3 things somewhere else. I was spending more time on admin than I was designing journeys. But today, I start here.
With the family's latest request in hand, Justine opens the Magic Safari Planner.
Serious. Bring up everything we know about the Schwartz family.
Their travel history, preferences, and past conversations are organized in seconds.
They'd like a 12-day safari in July 2027, combining with Sabi Sand, the Okavango Delta, and Victoria Falls. They're bringing their grandchildren, so prioritize child-friendly properties, exceptional guiding, and experiences they can enjoy together.
The planner gathers destination knowledge, property informations, and availability. What once meant long searches and inquiries across multiple platforms and suppliers is brought together all in one place. The Magic Safari Planner creates a short list of suitable properties based on Justine's requests. Now the most important part begins. Justine applies her expertise and her knowledge of her clients. She knows which properties her clients like, where the guiding will meet the family's expectations, and which experiences they'll enjoy sharing with their grandchildren most. Once Justine has made her selections, the Magic Safari Planner turns them into a personalized draft itinerary, connecting the logistics, properties, and experiences together seamlessly. But the first draft is not the final answer. Justine reviews every detail through the lens of what she knows about her clients. Justine adapts her client's itinerary, making changes to the dates or properties.
Let's switch a few things up, Sirius. Let's try different dates.
The Magic Safari Planner pivots based on her requests and expert input, recalibrating using her guidance to prepare the perfect itinerary. With all of the admin and planning handled, Justine can focus on using her expertise, judgment, and the little details that make the trip extra special.
By using the Magic Safari Planner, a process that once took me days now takes only minutes, while ensuring my personal touch is never left behind.
And I'm sure many of you can relate to Justine, but what you have just seen isn't really a planner. It's proof that for the first time, human knowledge no longer has to live only inside of humans. And when knowledge becomes infrastructure, well, then entirely new business models are going to become possible for our industry. And that's the real opportunity that I believe stands before us. So if I'm right, and that is a big if, we've all got a decision to make. And unfortunately, it's not a technology decision, nor is it even an AI decision. It's an organizational one. Because every business in this room has built an extraordinary knowledge ecosystem. It's probably taken you years, and in some cases, decades. But here's the uncomfortable part. That ecosystem is also probably the very thing that has made you successful, which is exactly why it is so hard to question. So perhaps the most important question isn't how do we use AI? It is this. If you were starting your business today, knowing everything that you now know, would you build it the same way? Because if that answer is no, the next question becomes, so what are you waiting for? Now, don't panic. I am not suggesting that you all go back to the office tomorrow or on Monday morning and delete your CRM. My point is much simpler. The biggest challenge facing African tourism is not artificial intelligence. It's whether we're willing to rebuild the ecosystems that made us successful in the first place for a world that is changing underneath them, for a world where knowledge is no longer going to be scarce. And much like how AI is going to do this, that conversation is probably also a whole talk on its own. But here's one final thought I'd like to leave you with. Whenever technology makes something abundant, value doesn't disappear, it simply moves. Printing didn't end great authors, the internet didn't end great brands, and I can assure you artificial intelligence is not going to end great tourism businesses. It will simply change what they are valued for. But if knowledge becomes infrastructure and knowledge is no longer our greatest differentiator, then we need to ask ourselves, what is? Well, judgment, trust, taste, creativity, empathy, relationships, and humanity. Because here's the big irony. The more artificial intelligence learns to think, the more valuable it's going to become to feel human. The consultant who truly understands the needs of a family, the guide who knows exactly when to remain silent, or the lodge manager who remembers a guest's favorite wine. those things don't become less valuable, they become priceless. Because if artificial intelligence becomes responsible for applying knowledge, well, then we no longer have to run knowledge businesses, which means we become free to do what only humans can do: build trust, create relationships, exercise judgment, and inspire confidence, and create the moments that our guests will remember for the rest of their lives. So perhaps the future of African tourism isn't about becoming less human. Perhaps it's about becoming the most human it has ever been. And with that, I would like to leave you with a short video. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.
If you're human and you know it, show it. If you're human and you know it, show it. If you've got kindness, then share it. If you've got judgment, don't hide it. If you've earned somebody's trust, if you've listened